This is a knitting and fibre arts podcast from Bristol in the UK. And this is the first episode, so bear with me while I get used to talking in front of a camera, which is historically something I'm not super comfortable with. But this year, although I don't really go for New Year's resolutions, but this year I really wanted to try and do some more things that are passion projects, that things I really love. And I am an aspiring knitwear designer, so I thought this would give me a bit of accountability to put more time and energy into putting my stuff out into the world. So it's going to follow a pretty standard knitting podcast format if you're familiar with those. I'll be recommending some other podcasters and places to go and look for inspiration. And every week, maybe every week, every episode, I'll try and do it every week, but we'll see what happens. Every episode I'll talk about what I'm wearing, if I am wearing knitwear. I'll talk about what I'm working on, anything I've finished, how I found projects. And the intention with this is to be quite honest about how I found certain patterns, certain yarns, certain experiences, because I think that it can be really easy to jump on trends and follow all of the big things that are happening in the world of knitting. When you kind of get into it, you see that there are all these big trends happening, and sometimes they're great and there's a reason, and sometimes they're a bit overhyped. So I'd like to provide, as a relatively new knitter, a bit of my perspective and my opinions about some stuff. So with that in mind, I'll start with what I'm wearing. So this is my tulip sweater by Melody Hoffman, or Bee Mandarines. I'll put all the names and everything on the screen, and everything will be linked. Everything I talk about will be linked down below. So if you miss anything, it'll be down there. I loved this as soon as it came out. I follow her on Patreon. I really like it. I'm a big fan of simple garments that have a tiny bit of interest, because I'm a process knitter, and I love stockinette. I love miles of stockinette when I don't need to concentrate on it, but then having a bit of interest at certain points keeps me engaged in the project. So this is really straightforward raglan sweater, and then it has this beautiful scalloped hem, and I actually changed the pattern very slightly. I didn't alter it hugely, but I added the scallop onto the sleeves as well. So I just decreased I think a couple more or a couple less, I can't remember, stitches to get the right stitch count I could divide to do the scallops on the wrists as well. On the cuffs, which I really love. It's not super obvious, but it's just a nice little detail if you see it. This is knit out of Nutiden. It's quite an old colourway now. I can't remember which month it was from, but this is, I'm going to say it wrong, I'm sure, Salighet. Apologies to any Swedish people if I'm butchering that name, but I love this colour. It's so happy. It shows up, if you've knitted with Nutiden, you know it's got tons of different colours in it, so it shows differently in different lights, which I really like. Sometimes it looks really, really yellow, and sometimes it's really warm and ochre and mustard like it is now. And I love it. It was a joy to knit. It knit up quite quickly. I'm not a super experienced garment knitter, although I'm getting better and I'm working on it. So this was one of the first sweaters that I knit kind of true to a pattern, and not just working things out, and it went really well. It was lovely. I will say a couple of things. One about the pattern, and it's not anything wrong with the pattern, it's just personal preference, but the neck is really wide, and I did the smaller one, and it's very, very big. Now I don't mind, but I would prefer it to be slightly closer in. I wear it all, I mean I do wear this all the time, but if I was to do it again, which I might, then I would probably make this a little bit smaller so it's not quite so far out. And I also find, and this is a thing with raglans in general, that it can get a bit square and you kind of get this one pull point where the raglan decreases or increases are depending on which way you're knitting it, which isn't something I love. So what I've done, and I'll take some footage of it and input it so you can see, but I've actually added a crochet chain just with some other kind of vaguely matching yarn on the inside and the back, which was a tip that I got, I think, from Roxanne Knits, which just stops the back from stretching. So there's still a lot of stretch and I can easily get it over my head, but it's not so loose and baggy, and it stops the back stretching at all, and that's really helped. But yeah, I love it. I really enjoyed knitting it, and it was my first experience knitting with Nutiden. And I will say, I'm not going to get on too much about Nutiden because there's obviously so much to say about them, but the yarn is lovely. It's unspun, and I'll show you a whip in a minute with it, so I'll show you the yarn. It's unspun, which does mean that it doesn't have a ton of strength by itself until you start knitting with it, and then it's really hardy. It holds up really well. It's incredibly light, it's incredibly warm. But each colourway is very different in terms of how they feel, and that is to do with both the dyeing process and also the different fibres and fleeces they're using in every batch. None of their colourways are repeatable, so that is a bit of a pain. It means you do have, if you have a project in mind, you need to buy quite a lot at once, which isn't my favourite. I like to be quite economic with my yarn purchasing. And also, I wear this constantly, and I've had to do quite a lot of work kind of depilling it, and I think that's just an unspun yarn thing. But if you're someone who doesn't want to have to worry about that, then Nutiden's probably not going to be a great yarn for you, just because of the nature of unspun. It does pill quite a lot. But I'm very hard wearing on my knits, and it still looks great, so love it. That was a really long introduction on what I'm wearing, but yes, that's what I'm wearing. And then I'm going to probably talk about my socks every episode because I've knitted more socks than anything else. I'm a fairly prolific sock knitter, but the hand knit socks I have on today were actually knitted by my mum many years ago. I'm not even sure what the yarn is. I think it might be one of the West Yorkshire Spinners old colourways. I'm going to stick my foot up, but they're just green, stripy, and they have a little heel flap and gusset construction, and they're really comfy. I've had them for years and years and years, and they've held up really. Two finished objects to show you. I'm only talking about finished objects from 2022 because I feel like otherwise this would be the longest episode in the world. So I'm going to get my little project bag here. I don't use project bags a lot, but I got given this one as a wedding present actually by my very good friend Kat from Heather and Hops, and I love it so much. I use it all the time. It's really practical. It's the perfect size, especially for small things or a pair of socks, but I have got a sweater in here before and it was fine. So one of my friends has just had a baby, so inevitably baby knits had to happen. So this one was actually started by my friend Monica when she was over visiting with me, and she didn't have time to finish it, so she just asked if I would finish it for her. So yeah, it's a really cute little baby hat. It's just improvised, a little bit of ribbing at the bottom, some stockinette, and then just really basic decreases at the top in sections of 4. And then I made a little pom-pom because why not? And I've just tied it onto the inside so that if she wants to take it off or wash it, or she just doesn't like the pom-pom, then it can be taken off and it's fine. But yeah, it's very cute. It's not washed or blocked yet, but the ends are woven in, so I think it's finished. So yeah, that's super cute and very quick to knit. And then I was inspired to make these. This is the second pair I've made of them now. And I was inspired to make them by Jude of Stranded Dye Works, who's made a few pairs of these now. These are the Cozy Little Toes baby socks, and they are so adorable. Look, tiny. Too much. So yeah, these are in the 6-week size. I love them. I love them so much. They're a really cute little pattern, available on Ravelry. Again, really quick. They're knit top down, and you knit like quite a long tube of ribbing, which looks really long, but it's because you fold it over, and that gives anyone who's got kids or been around babies, they're always losing their socks. And they don't usually have enough stretch here to keep them, like enough grip to keep them on their foot, so this little double ribbing is really good and helps keep them on their feet. And unfortunately I don't know what this yarn is. It was gifted to me by one of my friends, Maria, who gave it to me I think for my birthday, can't remember now, but I call it the unicorn yarn because it's just like perfect unicorn colours, very cute. Yeah, so those are going to be posted out to my friend who's just had a baby. So those are my only finished objects. Oh no, I lied. I've got one more pair of socks that I finished over Christmas, because inevitably Christmas break just meant I got lots of little bits done, but I was working on one big project, and then everything else was just kind of socks and quick stuff. So the other finished object that I have is a pair of socks, and these are completely improvised, but there is a bit of a story about them. So this yarn is incredible. I can't even get over it. So my friend Maria loves green, and I ordered a mystery set from Stripy Cat Yarns. I'll put links. I ordered a mystery set from them, and I was really lucky. I got the Harry Potter colourway, which I really wanted, and I knitted two pairs of socks for myself and my best friend, who we both really like Harry Potter, but we don't really want to give any more money to the Harry Potter brand itself. If you know, you know. I'm not going to get into that here. So I got that, and it was lovely. And then I had an additional skein of this incredible colourway, which I think is a Christmas colourway. And yeah, it's beautiful. It's on a pretty pale kind of white or pale grey base, and then it's got like really neon green, some very deep red, but it's quite variegated. So as you'll see up here, there's quite a lot going on. So I have made a pair of candy bar socks in the past, and I've got them here as a whip, so I'll show you, but I had planned to make a pair of those for my friend Maria because she loves green, and I made them, and they're just too small for her. They just fit me, and her feet are a little bit bigger than mine, so I was like, they're going to be too small. So I had enough yarn left over to make another pair, because I had used the green as a contrast colour. So I made these, just improvised them with two sets of yarn that I had. So the pale grey at the bottom, this is I think it's called Silver Fox, and it's by an indie dyer who I buy all the time from, Somerset Yarns, which you can find on Etsy. She's great. She's really, really good. Very consistent colourways. The yarn holds up really nicely. I've got a lot of her yarns in my socks. And then I striped it together with the Stripy Cat Yarns colour for a few rounds, just because I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough to do a full pair of socks. Spoiler, I absolutely did. I could have done the whole thing, I think, in the Stripy Cat Yarns, but I wasn't sure, so I faded it for a bit, and then I realised that one of the base colours in the stripes is basically this exact colour, so you can't even really tell. It just gets slightly darker towards this end of the socks, but that's fine. And then I just put some really simple cables in them. So if I open it up a bit so you can see, I haven't blocked them yet. So there's just a really straightforward twisted cable running up the front, which kind of starts at the top of the foot, just helps give the leg a little bit more grip so that it doesn't get floppy. And then after I had done the heel, which is a Fleagle heel on these, I put two cables running up the back of the sock, running in opposite directions. Nope, wasn't clever enough for that. Each sock goes in opposite directions, but all the cables are running the same way on each sock. There you go. So I just improvised these. They are a 64 stitch on 2.25mm DPNs, which is my favourite way of knitting socks, and they're toe up. I don't really ever do cuff down unless I'm following a pattern and it dictates it, only because I find I'm always left with so much yarn at the end, and I like to use up my yarn if I can. And then I did a 1x1 twisted rib with a sewn bind off. But the way that I do twisted rib, I quite often will actually knit my knits normally and twist my pearls. So I'll basically do combination knitting, which you can look up. It's really straightforward. I'm a continental knitter, so I hold my yarn in my left hand and my working needle in my right hand. So I find that ribbing combination knitting, is quicker for me. So I do a normal knit, and then I wrap my pearls in the opposite direction, which is just quicker for my hands. And I just keep doing that all the way up. So it twists, does twisted rib, but it's really hard to explain without showing you. Basically, the knit stitches get quite wide doing it this way, and your pearls are quite small, and then on the inside this is what traditional twisted rib would look like, where you've got these really dinky little knit stitches and quite wide pearl sections. And I just prefer the look of it when you can see more knit than pearl, but there's no right or wrong. It's the beauty of knitting. So these are from my friend Maria. By the time this episode goes up, she should have them already. Maybe she won't. Maybe this is a bit of a spoiler, but it's okay. And then whips. So I'll do the socks first because I've always got a pair of socks on the go. They're my comfort knitting. I find them really nice and easy, and I understand the construction of a sock really well, and they're quick. So as I said, the candy bar socks, and at some point I'll show you, I have got a pair that I finished a long time ago. I love this pattern, it's so interesting. So I did alter it slightly for this pair, just because again I was trying to be efficient with my yarn, because I knew I wanted to do a second pair of socks. But this is the same combination of yarns. So the base, the grey, is Silver Fox from Somerset yarns, and the green is the Stripy Cat mystery yarn. But it's got this really, really lovely stitch pattern, and then it's got some seeds as well. So the base of the sock is all little colourwork seeds, and then I did a section of a stripe here, and then so this isn't completely true to pattern, but then she does this beautiful thing where you have this diagonal going, and then I did the diagonal in the opposite way on the back, so that the foot's kind of got, this side is all that lovely stitch, and then this side is all the seeds. But that's just a little alteration. And then because I have a habit of wearing through the heels on my socks quite quickly, I did an experiment where I switched to, so I knit this on 2.25mm, and I switched to, I think, 2.5s, maybe 2.75s, and I marled the two yarns together. So I held both yarns and just knit normally as if both yarns was one strand, to do a Fish Lips Kiss heel. And that was just so that there's more strength and integrity in this heel, and it looks kind of weird when it's not blocked. I do have a blocker somewhere, but I'm not sure where it is, so I'll find it and maybe put it up in the background for another episode. But when they're not blocked and when they're not on, it looks like this is enormous, but once it's on the foot, it's absolutely fine. You can't even tell that it's a different gauge to the rest of the sock. And I really, really like these. I'm actually quite upset that they're not going to work for my friend, but they work for me, so it's fine. It's fine. And then this is normal twisted rib, so that's got the tiny little knit stitches with slightly bigger pearl stitches, and then on the inside it's the opposite of that. Yeah, so I really like them, and I'm working on the other one, so it's kind of a half finished object. I have this much of the second one done. Also a 64 stitch sock, but the pattern is written so it's basically for any multiple of 4. And yeah, it's a really lovely pattern. She's got videos of how to do the kind of fancy stitches as well, really clearly written. And yeah, Dolly Lasham, if you haven't checked out any of her patterns and you like interesting stitch ideas, definitely go and look at them. I think she's a really underrated designer. She's got so much, she's really prolific, she's done loads of things, but I don't hear about her very much. So yeah, highly recommend, definitely go and check her out. She's got some beautiful stuff. And then my final whip that I'm going to talk about today is this behemoth that I've been working on for a long time, but it's finally kind of nearly done, which is awesome. So this is a jumper for my friend Monica. It's also in Nutiden. This is the Birch Pullover by Pam Allen. Now, it's not blocked, so it is a bit puckery just because of the way the decreases are worked. But the purple Nutiden is Bariguette, I think it's called. And then this corally pink is Sinen. And it's beautiful. It smells so sheepy. Oh, I love it. My dogs love it as well. I've taken advantage of my dogs not being here for a bit to do this episode. But they love, whenever I've got Nutiden out, they come and sniff it. They're like, oh my gosh, what is this? Yeah, I love it. It's a different construction for me because it's knitted bottom up, which I've never done before. And I will say it took me a long time to get through the body because bodies are long. But what was kind of nice about it was all the interest happens at the end because you're knitting bottom up. So it was like, it took me about probably 3 months to get to here. And then this happened in about 2.5, 3 days. It was so weird. And I thought knitting colour work with Nutiden would be very slow. I thought that you know, being unspun yarn, it would be tricky to pick up because the way I do colour work is I hold both yarns over the same finger and then I just pick the one that I need and I keep my dominant colour on one side. So yeah, I thought it was going to be really slow and it really wasn't. Once it's finished and blocked, I will show it to you again, but if you're interested in the floats, because I know everyone wants to see the floats, that's what it's like on the inside. So it's pretty tidy, not too bad. The pattern is if you're new to colour work, it's a great pattern. If you like garment knitting and you've done a few sweaters or a few jumpers, it's a really good colour work pattern to start with because the colour work charts are very short and really memorable and they get shorter as they go up. So I think this one is 12, it's a 12 stitch repeat, this one is 8, this one is 6 and this one's 4. So they're really, really fast and easy to memorise, which is lovely. And then what you do is, and you can probably tell, this is the back, so you've got this like kind of weird jog in the middle where the pattern starts. So yeah, the way that you decrease, because you're working from the bottom up, so you decrease in all these plain purple sections are the decreases. So that's why it looks a little bit puckery because it's not blocked out yet. And then I did slightly more ribbing on the collar than is requested, and again that's just to help counter this super stretchy collar, and I wanted it to be nice and warm and like a big hug. Nearly finished one sleeve. I have altered it. There is some colour work at the end of the sleeve that you do. So you do your decreases as you go down, they're staggered, so it's a tapered sleeve, and then there's some colour work. I think it's this same chart here goes around before the cuff, but I got Monica to try it on last time she was here and she wants to do more of a balloon sleeve, so it's straight all the way down. I'm going to do some rapid decreases at the end and then a little tight cuff. So I'm not going to do the colour work on the end of the sleeves, which actually is a little bit simpler as well. But yeah, I love it. I'm very excited about it. I hope it turns out nice. But yeah, it's really, really lovely and I'm very happy with it. Again, it's Nutiden, so if it's like the only sweater she's wearing for a while, it might be a little bit tricky. But yeah, I'm really, really happy with it. I think it's lovely. The colours are beautiful. They're not really my colours necessarily, but they look amazing on her. I am in a bit of a kind of pause moment with knitting, in terms of picking up new projects and casting new things on. I'm always doing socks because I can't help myself. But I would like to do some more garments. So I'm not picking up too much else in terms of small projects. I've also got some more friends who are pregnant, so I'm going to be doing some baby knitting kind of in between. So socks and baby knitting are my palette cleansers, and then yeah, and then I'll be doing some garment knitting. My friend Sarah from the Sip and Knit podcast sent me a Ravelry pattern. She's in Canada and I'm in the UK, so getting actual physical things to each other is quite tricky right now. And she surprised me with picking a pattern that was in my Ravelry favourites, so that was really lovely. And I'm probably going to try and do a bubble jumper pattern that she gifted me, which I'll talk about if I start it. I'm always a little bit hesitant to recommend patterns if I haven't tried them, because you know, it's a bit of a tricky thing. I will say actually, the way that this birch pattern is written, everything is really, really clear up until the armholes, and then it's a bit confusing. And I have a little group of knitting friends on Discord who I met through Kat, Heather and Hops, her Discord. And I met kind of a smaller group through that, and I had to put a message on and say, can anybody else make sense of this? It was very late at night and I was doing that classic problem where I was like, no, I want to split for the sleeves before I go to bed. And I definitely think if I had just slept and woken up the next day, I would have been able to make sense of it, but I couldn't, which is fine. Yeah, so what you do is you put a few stitches on waste yarn and then you cast on a whole bunch of stitches so that you end up with a much wider loop. So you knit up from the bottom, and obviously this is your round, up from the bottom, up from the bottom, and then you put a few stitches on the underarm on waste yarn, that's those here, and then you cast on a load of stitches onto waste yarn, which you then pick up, and then your round becomes this yoke that you can see going all the way around. So the first couple of rows of that are quite tricky because there's not really any stability from any fabric underneath them. That is a horrible description, but if you do go to knit this pattern, two things. One is it's from a book, which altogether I think it's relatively cheap. There are 11 patterns in there, and I found this on Ravelry, really liked it, saw that it came from a book from Pam Allen, and I looked through them and I think I wanted to knit 10 of the 11. They're lovely, they're really simple basics with a bit of interest. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to buy it. So it's a really good book. This is the only pattern I've knit from it so far, and it is very clear apart from that armhole, and full disclosure, I think I may have just been very tired, but it wasn't super clearly written. So if you're a slightly new knitter, just ask. You know, that's one of the great things about the knitting community, is that people are really helpful. If you've got a question and you're like, I can't make sense of this sentence or this paragraph in a pattern, can anybody help? Yeah, people are really great at just giving you a bit of their expertise. So yeah, I'm gonna knit some more garments soon. I'm also coming up with a couple of designs, probably going to be sock patterns to start with, will be the first things that I release, but we'll see. And I'm also experimenting with non-superwash and no nylon socks. I have a lot of hand knit socks, and most of them are some form of merino nylon blend, which, you know, I knit. I also have socks for my husband, and he's really hard on his socks, so I don't know how well he would get on with no nylon. But I really want to try, because I'm just getting more and more to a stage where I still have a fair amount of you know, old acrylic and quite a lot of superwash, but I really enjoy knitting with more rustic yarns, and you know, I personally don't find this scratchy. I know some people do, which is completely fine. But I'm just personally really enjoying knitting with smaller batch, more rustic, less processing. So I think that's probably something I'm going to try and get into a bit more this year. And finally, I will be trying to take part in the Maker's Dozen, which I'll link below. But basically the premise is that you use your existing stash and you try and finish one existing project or stash project a month for the year of 2022. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. This month it will probably just be some combination of socks and possibly this jumper. I might be able to get this finished by the end of January. I'm going back to work next week, so we'll see if I have the time. I probably won't be able to get a whole yoke done in 2 days like I could at Christmas. But yeah, I would like to try and take part in that, because I think actually Sarah from the Sip and Knit podcast was talking about it recently, and I really agree that it can be quite overwhelming when you see this beautiful yarn and you buy it and you don't really have an idea of what you're going to do with it, and then you end up with this enormous collection. I don't really like, similarly to Kat, also is another one, and Sarah, we don't really enjoy the word stash when we talk about yarn. because it has some quite specific connotations of it being this like dodgy thing that you're doing, and it's not. It's a beautiful craft, and I think we should be respecting that it's an important part of our lives, and it's not something we should be remotely ashamed of. So I like to say my catalogue, which is probably a bit terrible, but in my collection of wool, I have still got quite a lot, even having had a few clear outs and finished some big projects recently. So I'm trying not to buy any more until I've got plans for things. So I'm particularly not just impulse purchasing yarn because it's beautiful. Sock yarn is kind of the one exception to that, because I'm always knitting socks, and socks are also the one place that I don't really care about colours and stuff. I'm quite zany, and I'll pick lots of mad colour combinations and things with socks because I don't really mind. Whereas with garments, I'm quite particular, and I like interesting basics, which I appreciate is maybe not the most interesting thing to look at on a podcast, but we'll see. My intention with design also is to do something similar, so that everything is really wearable, massively practical, and can be worn over and over again with lots of different things. But there's just a bit of interest both for the construction and making it, and also then for wearing it and other people seeing it. So yeah, I think I'm going to end the podcast there today. I'm going to try not to keep these too long. Obviously I wasn't talking about tons today, but hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for sitting with me for the first episode of Meridittle Makes, and I'll see you again very soon.